Good morning, RadioNext.tv. We are live here from the Hope Center, Indianapolis, Indiana. And Dr. Mark at the party all night.
Yes, sir.
Technology at its finest, man.
There we have a glitch from time to time, don't we?
It's all right then.
Yeah, we got to get a shout out here to the Hope Center Indy. This is a great facility. We just came in the front door of the boutique. Fantastic opportunities here to give hope to folks who are in need of such hope. And we're grateful, too, for Collaborate 317, the opportunities that we have there as a nonprofit through Comenius Institute. And just a word about Comenius. Comenius crosses 3 bridges. We emphasize a help for Christian young people going into IUPUI, helping them to navigate views of life that they've not heard of before. Second bridge is into communities. And our special emphasis through this radio show is connecting black and white leaders throughout Indianapolis. And the third bridge is Christianity into culture, helping Christians to understand culture. HB, we are going to be talking about communication today and got some folks coming in that know a thing or two, along with you, actually, about communication.
Really now. And we also want to give acknowledgments to Coffee USA, the financial literacy nonprofit that pretty much planted the seed here for the Hope Center, and it is teaching people how to get their financial lives together, but also if your financial life is together, a lot of other areas of your life seem to be a lot less stress-free as well. We're not going to take our first break today, Mark, because we had our technical difficulties signing on. We're going to go right in. No, but we were talking about communication today.
Yeah, so I got to say to you right away then, because you're the guy who's been doing this communication for a long time. I've been with you now for 2 years, really enjoyed our time together. I've got to ask you to tell us the story of how God has gifted you as a communicator and what that has meant to not only yourself but to people around Indianapolis.
Well, interesting question. I think, communication, first of all, I think the gift of listening. And, if you're compassionate, then you probably listen with concern. And, what I've tried to do is just to make sure that I am hearing the needs of the people as I try to address outcomes, and, with the goals that we set in our community. So the biggest gift I think I have, though, is watching my grandmother. As a very, very young man, I was forced to be with her every day. She was an entrepreneur. Mother was out there doing her thing, aunties, uncles working, and getting an opportunity to watch her every day go out and see what she could do versus what she wanted. Was her message. And that was embedded in me. And I think as a communicator now, what I'm trying to do is say, how can I help? How can I give something back before I'm asking for what I'm going to get? So I think that's my God gift.
Yeah, that's an impressive emphasis, of course, going back in history and thanking those who have gone before us, who have given us so much. Thanks for sharing that story with us.
Absolutely. Now, we've got some things going on today, technically, that I am ill-equipped to prepare for today, Dr. Mark, but we're going to get in it. Let's take a break and come back because I do have to get some things up since my computer went down. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio right here on the Cool Groove site, RadioNext.tv. RadioNext.tv. We are back, man. Let me tell you something. We are live on location, and I just want to remind you again, if we do have some technical difficulties, please bear with us. We are inside the Hope Center, and the Hope Center does have some security, I'm sure, surrounding firewall protection, so things on the internet can't come in or get out. As these young ladies try to get their life back together here. The Hope Center is an institution here. It's the largest of its kind in the United States. It is for human trafficking, young women who have been involved in human trafficking, the opportunity to come and get their life reset. They're offering counseling, offering rehabilitative programming here, and it is an unbelievable facility. If you would like to volunteer or come over here and donate some resources, you're more than welcome, and we'll be giving you that information. That is why we're broadcasting here today. This is Media Day at the Hope Center, and we're trying to get the word out about this great organization, this great institution, trying to get the lives of our young ladies back together, and the opening of the Hope Center for Men. We've got young men experiencing the same drama, and we want to make sure that once they get their life back together, then let's make whole citizens out of them. Dr. Mark Eckel, forgive me, my brother.
Yeah, that's all right,
You're
man.
the coolest customer on this planet here, because, and I mean, really, we very rarely have a lot of technical difficulties, but we are up on the air right now, and we are talking today about communication.
That's right.
And very, very important. And I got you together now, partner, so we're getting ready to get all the way in. I guess why should communication be important to Christians? Every week we are going in talking about not only a subject matter, but as Christians, how do we affect it and how do we better do it?
Yeah. So just to give a couple of ideas here, first of all, I would suggest that all Christians believe in both special and general revelation. Special revelation means that there is a communication from God to man in His Word, that is through Scripture, and also then through His Son, through Jesus, whose birth we're about to celebrate here this particular month. But there's also what we refer to as general revelation, and that is revelation that we have all around us, whether it be through the creation of God or through the creatures that are here, namely us, human beings. So just to give a story from yesterday, HB, a couple of brothers and I, a couple of African-American pastors down the city, we spent 4 hours together, and we're into the collaborative emphasis, talking about what we can do in the future. Actually, we are going to be together this week 4 times in 5 days. So that's the idea of communication, the idea of having the opportunity to be together, spend time together, look at how we can work together. That's what you and I do every week.
All the time. And I mean, the model is the blueprint is there.
Yeah.
And I guess, you asked me a question when we started, and, as a communicator, you're doing some special things as well as far as, bridging that gap, that cultural gap. So your gift of communication, when did you first notice it and experience it? And, well, I met your mother, so I know where part of that comes from.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Mom should be here to tell the story, I think that would be interesting. But she would tell you that this all started for me when I was 10 years old, when I couldn't climb the rope in the gym class. You remember those days you were supposed to climb that dumb rope to the ceiling?
How dumb was that? Were you a little chunky?
Oh, my word. I was a little fat, roly-poly kid. I know.
Pull up on that rope
either. That's why we're twins, man, you and me. So 10 years of age, here I was, couldn't climb the rope, couldn't do anything at gym. They had this big gym night, and so everybody decided that since Mark couldn't do anything physical, that he could be the guy in front of the microphone. And ever since then, Mark has been in front of the microphone. So there it is.
Absolutely.
That's how it's rolled.
Prolific speaker. If you ever get an opportunity, definitely, if you see Mark Eckel on the bill, go check him out. But your communication is a gift, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. And it takes all of us to make this thing
That's
work.
Right.
And
it does.
I know some of the sharpest people I know would rather not say 2 words. They can plot and plan, though. I guess before we go to the break, what principles from Proverbs can we apply as Christians to what we're trying to talk about as far as communication today?
Sure. So I'll make it short and sweet because there's so much in Proverbs about this. If you're listening and hearing us this morning, I would just suggest to you to go look at Proverbs and these 3 words in Proverbs. Look up the words tongue, lips, and mouth, and you'll see them repeated over and over and over again. And the whole point, of course, is that what we are doing with our mouth comes out of our insides. That is how we think and how we are created to be and so on, but also the sinful nature that comes out sometimes. I think one of the things that we should focus on sometimes when we talk about the book of Proverbs and the communication is where does this come from, not just from our lips and our mouth.
We are back. You are listening to Woof and Woof Radio on the Cool site. Great show here today, and as I mentioned, we're having a few hiccups, but we're going to get through this, man. My Lord and Savior will not let the Hope Center down today. Woof and Woof Radio down today. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell in the house right now. And we're going to be joined by Liz Meyer and Jeff Collingwood here as we continue to talk about communication. In the 21st century, communication is a brand new day and age, Mark, as we try to navigate through this, especially for us who have had to make the change,
that's right,
as I like to call it, from manual communication to
That's
now
right.
everything being information age. Why is it so important that Christians know how to communicate well at this time of year as a Christian? I mean, it's the Christmas season and holidays. Talk about what we need to understand.
What we need to understand around the holiday time is our emphasis is always going to be about the birth of Jesus. This is our focus. In fact, this week I was on Moody Radio just yesterday, as a matter of fact, doing an interview with Kelly Thompson up in Anderson, Moody Radio up there. And we were discussing the importance of hymns and learning hymns. And so you can actually find this later on a Comenius Institute website, and we'll be discussing this actually, or having that particular podcast available to you. But what we discussed in that particular interview was the importance of how music changes us. So one of the things that I discovered in my research was that in Time Magazine reported just a couple of years ago that singing literally lowers stress, sidelines depression, and inspires joy. And gee, would it be any real jump for us to recognize the fact that during Christmas season, that Christmas music and the emphasis on the Christmas message should come across so strongly and inspire such joy. Man, I could go on here, HB, but there's just...
why I'm laughing. This is, your second year around the horn with me during the Christmas season. And, I have this little rant that I do about some of the things that take place during our Christmas season. I'm going to let it go today, but Saturday morning, if you want to find out more, definitely tune in to the Jumbo Love Show, and you'll get what I mean, because I think we do our Lord and Savior some disjustice.
Isn't that the truth?
A lot of times in what we do in recognizing what's really taking place during our Christmas season. Mark, we got so many things to talk about in communication. One of those things being cultural communication.
Yes.
Let's talk about that before we get to the next question, because that's a big one on our show each and every week.
You bet.
And how different ethnic groups communicate.
Right.
Can dictate, the good and the bad of who we are as Christian folks, too.
All of that, yeah. So let me just go back to Comenius for a second and say one of the reasons why we put together 3 one-minute videos is because we know that the average ability to listen to something online hovers around 2 minutes. So we decided that we should go to a 1-minute video. We did 3 of them to highlight the 3 bridges that we cross, one to IUPUI, one to all the neighborhoods and communities through the radio show, and then one into culture itself. And so my view of this is that because we're being bombarded constantly by information, by knowledge, I'm constantly talking to people about being succinct, direct, to the point. Just give you one example of this. I have a high school class that I'm teaching right now where the students are going to be taking or doing a research paper, 15-page research paper. They have to reduce that 15-page research paper to 500 words. That's the last assignment that they have in this research paper. The reason for this is because we know that the less communication you do, sometimes that's the better communication to have. Less is more, especially in this culture. HB, I think that's really the key here, is the cultural
like
communication.
A good married man. I like you've been married. I'm sorry, man. But you mentioned this, though, and we just kind of led into that. Why are communication skills essential in a culture obsessed with media, man? Everybody's a journalist now, and I mean, this week has just been horrific. When you look at the media and see what's being spit out there every day and what our news is being led off with, why is that so important, man?
Oh, man, when you stop to consider what we are being thrown at in this culture in terms of media, it's an abomination, quite frankly, about all the different ways that you can go. But one of the benefits of digital communication is that you can find different avenues, different points of view, and you don't have to take what's given to you anymore. Back in the day, we had the 3 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, and you had one of those 3 choices. Now, it's an infinite amount of choices, and you can go in lots of different directions. So I would say generally to people, look, don't just take in whatever it is that you're taking in one station, but you need to get a broad view of how this affects culture, and especially as a Christian, this is a huge issue.
Oh, and it seems like the propaganda machine is getting stronger and stronger now, with people trying to sway, people who buy that information. I guess the last question we're going to ask in this segment is, give me some Christian groups that are doing some great things in the city as far as trying to communicate and breed a better culture.
Sure. I was just at the Truth at Work conference here this last month. Great conference. Matt Peelan and we had Ray Hilbert there, who are the co-sponsors of this whole event. And they had brought in world-famous folks, one of whom, a guy by the name of Henry Cho, C-H-O, who's Korean, but he was brought up and born in Tennessee. So it's really interesting to have this comedian with a Tennessee accent who's literally, his folks are Korean. His comedy is clean. It is fantastic. We all laughed uproariously all through his routine. A great Christian man who does great comedy. Lori Borgman is another great writer here in Indianapolis. She does a weekly opinion piece, really, which is kind of homey, down-to-earth kind of thing, but very practical, very engaged, and always shouting out those universal principles that come from God because she's a believer. One more example of this would be Gary Farvel, who's a great cartoonist. He communicates in a way that's altogether different. He communicates through pictures. And so every day in the Indianapolis Star, you get somebody who's a Christian who's communicating his values through those particular cartoons and has a tremendous impact across the board in Indianapolis.
Absolutely, and communication is what we're doing today. We are live from the Hope Center as we're doing Media Day. We want to thank them for inviting the Comenius Institute in, Radio Next in. RadioNext.tv. We are live from the Hope Center today, man. We are having a wonderful time, even though we are having a few technical difficulties out of here. And I'm going to keep letting you know we are at the Hope Center, and the Hope Center is a facility to help rehabilitate young ladies who have been involved in human trafficking, trying to help them get their lives back together, providing some excellent resources and programming. And Media Day is actually going down today. Tell somebody to tell somebody. This is very important. Every last one of you, I guarantee you, has been affected by this thing called human trafficking. Somebody in your family, a little one that you know and love. This is not the movie Taken as we know it. This is very, very elementary. Young people in need and older people taking advantage and preying on these young ladies. And I'm telling you right now, it's a major problem, especially with the economy the way it sits right now. So, you know, that's why we're communicating today. And Dr. Marcus, we go into the last segment before we introduce your great guests who are master communicators here in this community. We always have to go into the parts where we talk about how Christians affect Indianapolis, number one. And give me some great communicators in this city, Christian communicators who are doing some positive things. You bet.
So let me start with Q Commons. One of the things that we've done here in last month, in the month of October, is a whole bunch of folks from around Indianapolis got together and heard not only national speakers that were piped in from Nashville, Tennessee, but also some folks from around Indianapolis who are doing really great work in lots of different directions, folks that are heading up nonprofits. There was a man there who heads a nonprofit that does theology at bars, which is fantastic work, some really great stuff going on there. Some youth pastors from around town that do great music. Let me tell you about a couple of folks that they've got an event coming up. We're trying to get them on this radio program, actually. Matthew Barnes and Tim Overton doing Prayer with Legislators, which is actually happening on the 3rd of January, starting out the year 2018 with this great opportunity to pray over the legislature in Indiana. And Tim Overton and Matthew Barnes doing great work there, a whole different kind of communication. But I was just messaging with them this morning, seeing if they'd be available on this program on the 27th of December. So look out for those kinds of things. And then last but not least, I'd like to give a shout-out to two special groups of folks who, quite frankly, we just kind of take them for granted, and that is the preachers and the teachers. There's a whole bunch of churches in this Indianapolis area doing really good work. The word is going out in lots of different directions from a Christian vantage point. And then, of course, we've got great teachers, great Christian teachers, both in public and in Christian schools that are doing great work, and we want to emphasize them as well. Great communicators across the board, HB.
And we touched on this a little bit earlier in the show, Mark, and we were talking about the cultural differences in communication. Yep. And as a Christian man, I know that it's up to me to be responsible for me and how I interpret or how I distribute information, so I can make sure that the message is being heard. And we were talking earlier in the show about the gift of listening.
That's right.
To become a good communication, be a good communicator. Talk about some of the differences between the cultures and what we really need to do as Christians to help this communication thing work.
Well, let me start out by what we've been being barraged by here lately, and that is the issue of shame. We have a national epidemic going on over the last month. Started out with Harvey Weinstein and has kind of floated through all different manners of Hollywood personalities, as well as into political personalities, all kinds of folks being impacted and affected by men who can't keep their hands to themselves, basically. Bottom line is that. And what we're seeing, though, in the media is that what the media is doing is literally shaming people with the alleged whatever it is coming from whatever quarter it is. I think it's really important and powerful for us as Christians to emphasize another 5-letter word, and that would be the word grace. Are we coming alongside people that we know who are struggling with whatever sin it might be, whatever issues they might face in the culture at large, and making the move from shame to grace? I think that would be an important idea. Another idea here is that we need to persuade others to respond properly. And I'm going to speak to these particular groups. I want to speak to the voices of people who are powerful, privileged, and well-positioned. So powerful people who are well-positioned in positions of privilege bear the responsibility of giving voice to important ideas. And so the important ideas of taking care of women who are abused, the reason why we're here at the Hope Center here today, and the power of this particular communication tool. But we have to have people who are stepping out, standing out, and speaking out on behalf of those who can't speak on their own. And I'm specifically talking about the powerful, the privileged, and the positioned. And then finally, I would say that we need to emphasize not just in our speaking what's important in terms of communication, but we need to emphasize this in terms of our doing. People in this culture are sick of hearing lots of words. They're sick of hearing lots of talk, and what people really do respond to are folks who are behaving properly, doing good things. So just to give an example of this, we've heard of this triad for as many years as I can remember: truth, goodness, and beauty. But I think we need to flip this thing around. I think we need to talk about showing beauty, doing good, and then speaking truth. I don't think that people are going to want to hear our truth until they see beauty, until they see us doing good, and then maybe they'll say, hey, you know what? There's something different about you other than that what we see in the culture, and we want to know what that is. And I think there's where it's at.
You know, and before we get to our last question of this first segment, the power thing. You know, and Scripture says clearly, you know, it's going to be harder for, you know, the rich and the mighty to get into heaven than it will, you know, for a camel to get through the eye of a needle.
That's right.
Do we set ourselves up, you think, by thinking that people who, quote unquote, have the power are the people that we should be believing in to help manifest change? I think that's our problem a lot.
I do believe the same thing, HB. I think we place too much emphasis on folks in a top-down setting and situation. And so what we need to do, and what we do at this radio show constantly every week, is we focus on Titus 3. We find Christians around Indianapolis are doing good, and we focus on that. We emphasize those people that are having a positive impact in the culture around us. And so for you and I, this is a really powerful idea. That is grassroots. We believe that this thing comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. And I do believe, along with you, that we place way too much emphasis on those who are in those positions instead of folks like those sitting with us today who are doing good in the community.
You know, I have a comedy mind. I'm just so happy that going to heaven might be a good possibility based on my bankroll. So I'm just teasing. But the last question we have in the first hour, before we get to our guest, Mark, is movies. We know that you identify and are able to communicate and translate information through movies.
Yep.
What movies should Christians watch if they want to see the power of communication?
Communication power, yeah. So I'm going to do a throwback film here. I want to go back to 1994, and the movie is Nell. And this particular film stars Jodie Foster, who is a young woman who for a long time has had to live in the woods. She's unable to communicate properly or well. And somebody like Liam Neeson, a doctor, comes alongside her and helps her bring her out of her shell. But the importance of communication there in that particular film, if you want to find out what's difficult about it, go watch that particular movie, 1994, Nell. The second one I would suggest here is the movie Babel. And Babel stars Brad Pitt. And this particular film is dealing with all kinds of folks. Right after 9/11, this film came out, and they're dealing with all kinds of concerns over language and nationality and ethnicity and how do we communicate with each other. All of these things are really powerful for us, and that particular movie does a good job of bringing it to the forefront. One last movie, the movie Arrival, which just came out this last year. This particular movie stars Amy Adams. And this particular film is a movie about science fiction, but actually communicating with extraterrestrial beings. So if you're really into the whole sci-fi thing, this is a really cool movie. And the idea of understanding that these extraterrestrials came to Earth not to destroy Earth, but to save Earth is a really powerful idea. But in order for this particular individual, played by Amy Adams, to actually figure this out, she had to go through all kinds of listening possibilities, all kinds of visual stimulation, all kinds of diagrams. This interchange between the aliens and the humans is just a fascinating thing to watch. If you want to learn anything about communication and how to do it properly, watch the movie Arrival. I highly recommend it. It gives us some principles, I think, HB, to really help people to understand communication better.
Absolutely. And speaking of understanding communication better, Liz Meyer and Josh Collingwood are in from Astute Rabbit Media. And this is one form of media that you're listening to today on this Internet Radio Exchange. But we have so many forms of media, as we've discussed now, to get messaging across. Polly Riddell is in the house, the storyteller. She tells and gives her messaging through media by telling stories of individuals. Right. And we've also got TV, we've got social media, we've got broadcast media like Amplify Indy and the great work that he does in producing video visuals so people can see. So media is broad, and it's a big deal right now.
It's a big deal right now. And just to give everybody an understanding, if you're hearing background noise, folks coming in and out, this is a big deal here at Hope Center in Indy today. Lots of media is going to be here, television, radio, internet, all kinds of folks coming in and out. So if you're hearing voices behind us, don't feel bad about that. This is actually something that's really powerful and good happening in Indianapolis today. HB, what do you think?
You know, I kind of like all this.
You do. You like that
I
stuff.
Love this
all that crosstalk.
But we're going to come right back. Warp and Woof Radio live on the Cool Groove site. We are at the Hope Center. Go and please Google Hope Center Indy. My brother Richard Samuels, I see, is in the house.
And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute sponsored show. And we are here today at Hope Center Indy. And we're promoting a great event that's going on, a media event, actually, that's taking place from 11 to 2 today. Some of the radio stations and TV folks are rolling in now, some of the internet sites, because they want to find out what's going on here at Hope Indy. This is a great opportunity for a lot of folks to be exposed to the wonder of what's going on here in Indianapolis. Let me just give you just a thumbnail sketch of this, but please go to Hope Center Indy. Check out their website, see what's actually happening here. This is, in Indianapolis, the largest institution dedicated to protecting women and human trafficking. I'll say that again. In Indianapolis, we house the largest institution that protects women from human trafficking. This is a great thing that's going on here at the Hope Center. Supplemented and supplied by a great host of Christian folks. You hear all kinds of crosstalk in the background. That's because there's a whole bunch of folks coming in, very excited about the opportunities of our day today. And we are in this particular venue talking about media and communication today on this radio show. So I thought, if we're going to have a media day here at the Hope Center, what better way to do this than to have folks who deal with media all the time? And we have special guests in here today that we want to make sure that get a word in about the good work that they're doing around Indianapolis. You're going to be hearing about Astute Rabbit Media. I'll say that again, Astute Rabbit Media. This particular group, headed by Liz Meyer and Josh Collingswood, is doing some really great work here around Indianapolis for lots of folks who need digital media hookups and the connections that they afford. Without further ado, let's introduce them. Whoever wants to start first, Josh or Liz, tell us a little bit about yourselves, your families, your churches, and your work in Indianapolis.
Yeah, so people always ask us, what's up with the name, Astute Rabbit Media? And that's actually one of my favorite questions to get asked. The first time I ever told anybody what the name of our company was going to be, they just kind of stared at me and they said, "What does that have to do with a website? What does that have to do with media? It's a rabbit." And I looked at them and I said, "What does Apple have to do with your phone or your laptop?"
That's great.
It's fun. It's memorable.
Yeah.
People know us as the rabbits.
That's great.
So it is. and we have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, Josh is, hi, I'm Liz, and Josh has made our rabbit come to life. So if you go on our homepage of our Astute Rabbit Media website, you will see our rabbit talking in a very good British accent, speaking to you about media and communications.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more about the Facebook page pictures that you sent me. Of course, every week, everybody that listens to this podcast or listens to the show live knows that I put up pictures of everybody that's going to be on the show. But you guys sent me these weird pictures. So tell us, explain what these pictures are.
There's a method to this madness, Mark. And did you know that people will actually click easier on a caricature of a photo rather than your absolute actual photo? Now, I don't know why that is, but that does exist. So I'm going for that 6% click rate. And we just felt that kind of showed our personality and how we pull in the graphics and talk in a visual storytelling manner.
Yeah. Are you happy with your picture, Josh?
I am very happy with my picture.
Okay. Just because, Josh, you actually run marathons, don't you, or something like that now? Yeah. You're running halves and full marathons?
Oh, not a full marathon.
Not a full. You're a 13-1 guy?
Yeah, I've ran a half marathon 2 years in a row now.
Wow. That's impressive. Well, we're going to have to get that picture before and after you run a marathon, I think. That would probably be at least honest to this whole thing. No, this is great. And by the way, I want to make sure I get my caricature picture at some point, too, because, if I'm going to be clickbait, then I want to have a good picture going on here. So tell us a little bit about why your work as Christians is important in this community, and how does that interact in any way at all with what you do at Astute Rabbit Media?
Yeah, well, communication, is very important to me as a pastor as well. I tell people that I'm a pastor in disguise as a media developer, cleverly disguised. But just like you guys mentioned in the first hour, our culture is so saturated with media, so obsessed really with especially social media, things like that. Communication is important to me because there's a message to be communicated, and so in any way that we can come alongside of churches and ministries like the Comenius Institute. And other things like that. Any way we can help out with media, because it's such a huge deal in our society now, and I think as the future progresses, it's only going to become even more so.
That's really an important and powerful idea. And so, since you mentioned that you're a pastor, tell us where you do your pastoring.
Yeah, so I'm on staff. I'm an associate pastor at Crossway Community Church of the Nazarene. It's about a 2.5-year-old church plant of Shepherd Community. It's another organization doing a lot of good in Indianapolis. So yeah, I've been there right about two years or so. Lots of fun. I actually went to college for ministry. My degree's in Christian ministry, and so that's a huge part of my background. I've always said though, if I had to be bivocational, I can't really think of anything I'd have more fun doing than media developing. Yeah,
and just so that everybody knows that this is an honest program here, do we have any background? I mean, did you take a class or two from me at any point in the past?
Yeah. I took Old Testament Survey 1 and 2 from you.
Oh, yeah. I won't ask you how you did. I won't do that to you, what was your final grade or anything like that. But I'm glad that, we've had this kind of connection going on for some time. Tell us, just for the sake of everybody listening, where is the church located?
It's located in South Grove Intermediate School in Beech Grove. It's right off 9th Avenue.
Okay, great. And Liz, what church do you attend? And, oh, by the way, tell them what you do on Sundays in the fall, by the way.
Well, for the last 4 years, I've had the pleasure of using our video capabilities that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I love doing. We love visuals that Josh and I storytelling, and we have been taping the series that you've been doing at Crossroads Church up in Fishers, and we enjoy making sure that people get that. And you know what it's about? It's about expanding the reach, and that's what media does. It gets the message out truth to be told, and it's a way of conveying that. But I'm going to confess something to you. Is that all right? Can
Sure,
I
go ahead.
That we're kind of Luddites, and because we come from a different viewpoint, what is a Luddite? You want to know. It's an 18th century person who actually did not believe in the mechanization or the technology of that day and fought against it. So here we are, immersed in this, loving what we do, helping use a tool, but it is only a tool. We go beyond knowing that tool to what is the real communication heart behind every message that we share, and does that come from foundational truth?
So you actually have a purpose behind all that you do, I guess. Would that be fair to say?
Fair to say.
Oh, wow. So what's really fascinating to me about in any kind of conversation I have with anybody is, can people answer the why question? So why do you do what you do? And, of course, you obviously have done that, so thank you very much. And for your Luddite comment, I think this is an important idea. And for those of you who aren't sure how to spell Luddite,
Luddite. But basically, Luddite just means there's no substitution for what God intended, which was human communication,
there
heart
you go.
to heart.
And so the face-to-face, but one of the things that Liz and Josh are doing is that they are actually taking something that could be lost. So let's say, for instance, my teaching on a Sunday morning in my church, once I teach it, it's done. It's gone. But if you capture it on video, it's there forever. I mean, for as long as whatever opportunities we have to put this up online exist. So that's a really positive platform for us to be on, actually a very positive work. So, Josh, I wanted to just give you another opportunity here to tell about some of the things that you do on our behalf for the Comenius Institute. Tell folks what it is that you are doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, so every Wednesday we do this radio show from 10 to noon, and Dr. Eckel here just showed me the USB drive maybe 20-30 minutes ago that this file goes on after the show, and he then sends that to me through Google Drive, and I download it and make it into a podcast. It goes up on YouTube, goes into iTunes, and gets pushed out to both websites, and lots of fun on that. So yeah, you do all of that. Plus you do my Moody radio interviews. Mm-hmm. You do that, and as well as downloading all the video stuff and anything else I ask you to do. I send Josh these errant emails saying, "Could you please move this to there and do that over here?" And you're always so generous. Thank you so much.
And Josh is very humble because he is a tech guru.
Yeah.
And when we're all panicked over something that has happened, he's sitting there figuring out how it happened, what happened, how we can correct it.
Yep.
He's always been that way.
Yeah, you just sit down and drink another cup of coffee and figure it out. The solution will eventually present itself. I used to tell people that actually it used to be my catchphrase. I almost used it as an email tagline, but I thought better of it. But it was I turn coffee into websites. Drink a lot of coffee, make a lot of websites.
There you
There's
go.
a connection between the two.
Just to give people an example of this, I mean, when we changed servers, do you remember that?
Yeah.
This last year, we changed servers. How many text messages did I send you? Josh, the website isn't up anymore.
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting situation anyway. That whole server transition was really unique. It took a little while, but we eventually figured it out.
Yeah, you figured it out.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with this, so everybody knows. It's really important to also recognize this, that while you hear my voice and HB's voice and all of the guests that are on the program, the folks that are really doing the work to get this out, to expand the reach, as Liz well suggested, are folks like Josh and Liz who are involved in Astute Rabbit Media. Tell us a little bit about any other projects that you're invested in right now and how you are helping to extend the reach of others through your work.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we've already mentioned with the podcast here, the church that I'm a part of, Crossway, just started podcasting a few weeks ago. One of the things that I find really exciting about working with churches is really just seeing the results of things. That first week that we ran the podcast, we had an additional 30 people that listened to it. Just about doubled our congregation for that week.
That's
we're a
great.
church of about 30. And so stuff like that. One of the churches that I did a website for, several years ago, I went back at the 3 or 4 month point and looked at their analytics online, and I saw that they had this huge following overseas, Europe and even Asia.
Yeah.
And it's just people want to hear the message.
Right. And what's fascinating, even to us here on this radio show, is that at any given time, people are listening to Radio Next from various continents, Asia, Africa. I don't know, maybe we got a listener or two down in Antarctica, who knows. But bottom line is, you're extending this reach idea is a really powerful communication tool. Liz, you have work specifically at as a communications professor at IUPUI. Tell us about any kind of segue or connection between what you do at Astute Rabbit Media and what you do at IUPUI.
Well, thank you, Mark, for asking that. I was actually tracking a little bit with the Extend the Reach.
Go ahead.
And it does
keep going.
extend the reach in different ways. But analyzing where the website starts or where that media is getting to, understanding the audience, these are all very important elements of communication that I'm instructing on all times. You need to be able to be succinct, like you said earlier, and to bring the power of words. The power of words can affect people even in different multiple platform medias. And so we have the tech know-how, but can you make that powerful connection through the articulation of what you do, like here at Hope Center? Can you really communicate that feeling, that touch that we are experiencing here by being in the presence of some of these people today?
Yeah. This is a powerful idea, and you emphasize the connection between words and digital media. Let's talk for a minute about the power of that connection. The issue of words. Let's talk for a moment about why it's important to wed the digital media piece, that is the technological know-how, with the importance of the word choosing, the word choices that people make. How important are word choices when it comes to communicating, even in digital media?
I always say Josh is the techie and I'm the tweaker.
Okay.
But we work off each other so well. We'll look at different content. And I always instruct and then try to apply it in my own writing when I'm creating content for a website. If I had to put $500 of value on that one word, would it be the one I'd choose? Because we know that the first 7 words in a sentence are going to make a powerful connection. And in storytelling, which this comes into, you're telling your story in the written manner, in that content. It's very important to hit right to the heart quickly so that people understand it's worth going a little deeper and reading a little further to understand what I'm expressing in this media platform.
Yeah. Josh, you're from a whole different generation than Liz and I are. How important is word choice, even for somebody like you in your generation? Do you have any thoughts or comments about that?
Yeah. I think it's even more so, specifically with my background as a developer. When you're on a website, when you make a website, you've got to realize your audience is only going to be on any given page for at the most 7 or 8 seconds. And so when you're trying to communicate a message to that person, like one of the projects I'm working on right now, they've got a lot of text on their website. They've got a product that they're very knowledgeable about, but on their pages it's just walls of text. And as I'm going through, looking for ways we can improve their online presence, I'm finding that I don't even read what's on their page because I'm busy looking at everything else, and so it's just a matter of realizing that there's a whole different way of writing for the internet.
Yeah.
I think Mark Twain actually said this great line, and he said there's a huge difference between lightning and the lightning bug.
And that's a great place to segue. We're going to take a short musical break. We'll be right back talking to Josh Collingswood and Liz Meyer from Astute Rabbit Media. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. Warp and Woof Radio, sponsored by Comenius Institute. And every week from 10 till noon on Wednesday, you will hear us live. Or you can pick up our podcast at ComeniusInstitute.com. and find all kinds of things there. We've got radio interviews from Moody Radio. We've got our radio podcasts that come out of this. We've got the video that comes out of the teaching on Sundays, all kinds of essays that are written there for your benefit and that explain what we do at Comenius and the power of this particular nonprofit throughout the Indianapolis community. This morning we are at Hope Indy. Hope Center Indy, and we are having all kinds of folks coming in the door. If you hear all the crosstalk behind us, it's a good day because all kinds of radio, television, and internet providers are here, and they are talking about what goes on here at Hope Center Indy, which is all about protecting young women who have seen and unfortunately been involved in human trafficking, prostitution, getting those folks off the streets, protecting them. This is a great organization. Highlighted, of course, by Collaborate 317 and the good work of folks like Bruce Ford and Josh Bach and Luke Panda Whisperer, all kinds of good folks here at 317 doing good work on behalf of the Hope Center. But we are here today talking about communication at the Media Day for Hope Center Indy, and that particular communication is, this particular communication group is Astute Rabbit Media, and we're joined today by Josh Collingswood and by Liz Meyer, and they are here to tell us a little bit more about the services that they provide. What would you say would be the services that you suggest through Astute Rabbit Media? Tell us about those things.
Yeah, so Astute Rabbit Media really kind of wants to be everyone's sort of one-stop shop for all things media design related, media production, stuff like that. A lot of it comes down to just telling the story, telling the story of your organization. What is it that you do, that you offer? People want to listen to stories. The narrative is what sticks with people.
Yes.
And so that's what we try to focus on. We do a lot with video. We've got big fancy cameras that can shoot 4K cinematic video.
We could tech talk you. They're GH4s. They do codec.
Yeah.
Yep. H.265.
Yeah.
Codec.
H.265.
Yeah,
is the
we
new
wanted
one.
to throw some tech stuff in there so you knew we actually knew what we were talking about.
There you go.
Yeah. And Liz is our video guru. And so she's definitely the person that helps me figure out a lot with cameras and do that.
My master's degree is in digital storytelling, a whole new field, isn't
there you go.
it? But I
That's
come
impressive.
from filmmaking,
Yeah.
so therefore we understand how each picture, like you do in the movies, communicates a great deal through the nonverbals of that
Right.
picture.
And you actually have some experience in film.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. You've been, what kind of properties have you been invested there with in film?
Well, the one I tell my students that they all freak out about is that I was in Liam Neeson, one of his very first photo opportunities where he got the part in the movie, and I was filming there in Britain, and while we were there, I tried to talk him out of acting. And so I'm very glad because I always put it in a very storytelling art kind of way, and I go, I keep the name, I keep it from saying Liam Neeson, and at the end then I say, and if I would have talked him out of acting, we wouldn't have Schindler's List, we wouldn't have Qui-Gon Jinn. That's when they get the point, and they all go, oh.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, you hold back the big name till the end. Yeah, that's impressive.
You gotta go for the impact.
That's right. So, Josh, come back to tell us a little bit about the digital work that you do and the services you provide at Astute Rabbit.
Yeah, so, like we said, video's huge. Photos are also really huge, especially when you deal with churches and smaller organizations. One of the big things that I see a lot is just pictures aren't really well done. They're low resolution, they're tiny. Sometimes they're shot with different aspect ratios. They either had the camera, vertical, and then they shot horizontal for a couple pictures, and so now we have to crop it and do weird things like that. There's a huge need for photos, and so we do things like that. As far as comprehensive website services, we do. A lot of our projects this year are more WordPress centered. Just because we found out we can leverage the database and the huge library of plugins and things that would take me, a month or so to develop on my own, that I can grab something that's out there and kind of respin it and make it do what it needs to do and things like that. So lots of programming. That's more on my end. Liz
and then I
more
do the content creation, but we really work well together with the clients to make sure we are getting to the heart of what they want said and how they want to say it. But we can give them good advice because a lot of times they don't know the questions to ask, and that is our field to help them understand how are they communicating with their audience and what can they do better to connect to that audience.
So the issue of connecting verbal and visual, How important is that in a culture that has so much information in it, connecting verbal and visual together?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was just looking at a website the other day that I'm kind of coaching them on how to do that, because they've got a list of things that they do, but it's just a list. There's no visual element. Somebody that does this really well that I was looking at as an example for this organization is actually Apple's website. If you go look at any product they sell, they're telling you everything it does in text, but the way they do it is through slides. And so as you scroll down any product page on their website, you see a description of everything it does, but then underneath of it's this huge, immersive, like full-width image of whatever it's doing, and usually it's animated so you can see what it's doing as you read about it. And so, as I've already mentioned, you only have 6 or 7 seconds to capture people's attention, and I think they do that really well. And so that's one of the examples that we try to provide to people as they're figuring out.
Josh is talking about web usability. That's the term in our, and we understand how that person relates to what media they're using. So there's a psychology behind how they click, and we all know that in general. But we're going deeper. We're looking at the analytics and coming across to say, here's where they're bugging out. This is where they've disconnected. This is where you need to think about recreating what you've got.
One of the things that kind of stands out in my thinking as I hear you guys talk about this is the issue that surrounds the concern about how long people stay on your site. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I got from our analytics at Warp and Woof that folks are actually staying on for a couple of minutes reading. If they read something, they're going to stay on for a couple of minutes. Is that about true?
Yeah, and when we see that, it's because they found what they're looking for.
Oh, okay.
If they find what they're looking for, then they'll look at it as long as they want to look at it. And so
okay.
Then we see longer page times, and longer is better at that point.
So how is the connection? Let's talk a minute about the connection between the importance of how we communicate on social media that connects people to our websites. So, somebody like me that's posting at least 2 or 3 times a day, and I'm trying to connect people to what we're doing at Comenius or what I've just written at Warp and Woof. Those kinds of things. What is the importance of intentionality of connecting social media back to whatever it is that your story is, what you're trying to communicate?
Well, here's what I found in the last year or so as I've been doing a lot more work with organizations that blog and publish things on a regular basis. What you promote on social media is where the hits are going to go and where you're going to see traffic go in Google Analytics and whatever other platform you use to track that sort of thing. So, I've got one client that posts a lot of blog entries and stuff like that. And what we do every time there's an entry is we then go make a Facebook post about it. And what we see is that post, you can go in and look on your organization's page and see how many people you've reached, and then you can track that. If you click on it, you can see how many of those people that you've reached have actually clicked on the link. And then it's even more interesting, I think, if you go into your analytics, because some people don't click on the link, they'll just go to your website and find it themselves.
Okay.
And so you can see that, whatever that thing you just published is outperforming all your other pages, because that's the new fresh thing. People have just seen on Facebook that you published it, so they're clicking on it, they're reading it, they're engaging with it. And I think whatever you promote, whether it's a post or a page, a section of your website, that's where the hits are going to go. How
much importance would you give to linking specific individuals that you know on social media with specific posts that you're posting about? How important is that to link people that you think might be interested in this idea with what you've just written or talked about or done a video on?
Well, I think, if I was a blogger and I was going to write something about connecting with college students, you'd be one of the first names I'd link into that, just because you do that sort of thing, and I know that you would then share that post out with your network, and that could be a means of getting greater exposure for that sort of thing. So I think anytime we can link in an expert in something that we're writing about. One of the people I used to work with several years ago told us as a team that he used Twitter strategically. He didn't use it just as a fun social networking thing. He used it strategically. He would actually go follow people that were industry leaders in whatever it was he wanted to do. Whatever it was he wanted to experiment with or get involved in, he'd go figure out who the top guy in that industry was and follow him on Twitter, just to read what he reads, to follow what he follows. that sort of thing. So I think linking specific people in can definitely help us out.
I feel like I'm backing into things all the time. So you're doing exactly what you're just suggesting. I find somebody that's really knowledgeable about fill in the blank X, Y, or Z, and then I go and follow them, and I realize, wow, they've been reading this article. Oh, I guess I should go read that article. And then that article ends up being part of an essay I write at some point in the future. But you're right. Connecting with people who know more than me, which is pretty much everybody, is really powerful and important, I think, in the social sphere of things. So let's take that a little bit, just a step further when we talk about social media. How important is it to choose your words wisely in social media? Maybe Liz can speak to this
We're
issue.
looking for the things that motivate people. We all know what those are. And can we connect those moments that are in your blog or your platform that you're trying to push people to? Can we say, is this an issue about love or hate or desire or power, in a good sense or a bad sense?
Yeah.
Because people are looking to go a little deeper into how are others thinking on this human condition.
Something that happened this last summer with Charlottesville, if you recall that, we had the white nationalists making their big march through Charlottesville, that little Virginia town, and I just made a general comment, I stand with my black brothers and sisters, #Charlottesville, which then just blew up my analytics. I mean, I had people coming after me for one thing or another, but it was that particular essay that I wrote on Charlottesville that probably has produced the most analytic evidence of anything I've ever written. And I've had some tremendously good responses to a lot of things I've written, but that thing just blew up. How important is it when we're dealing with video, pictures, essay, whatever, to capture the moment? Within how much time do we have to really hit on something that's powerful for that time, and how long does that last?
I'm looking more at the authenticity of the moment. So looking at, because it is timely, but is it going to be presented authentically, truthfully? People don't want a schmooze. They're not looking to read that anymore. They want to say, is this live? Is it happening right now? Or is it not, as I hate to do, #fake news. They kind of shy back from those things that are schmaltzy, and we now have that desire for the readers to see a vulnerability in what we write.
Yeah, so this idea of being able to step back and actually showing humility is kind of important. Josh, once more to the generational issues here. How important is it to folks that are the 20-somethings of life in and around Indianapolis or around the world for that matter? How important is the moment? How much time do we have between an event that happens and how long people will follow that particular event? Do you have any sense of that at all?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the event. I mean, there's still people that are talking about things that happened last fall with the election cycle and things that came up that way. And yet there are major events happening just in the last few weeks that, it's like, what happened, and we moved on. So I think it really it comes down to the event. One thing, just to kind of bounce off of what Liz just said, on the note of authenticity, I think especially the younger generation wants to read news that is based on fact. It doesn't come from an obvious angle of wanting to put down the opponent or just throw stuff at them. There's a lot of that out there, and when I see it, I just want to click off. I don't even want to go into that.
Okay. So are we? I'll just ask a personal question here. Are we approaching this in the right way? To say to people, look, we want to emphasize what people are doing that's good around Indianapolis. Are people generally more receptive to what's good than what's bad?
I think I certainly am. I've always liked reading the stuff that Comenius puts out about what's good in the neighborhood. This weekly radio show. I think so.
Okay.
I think we're developing a skin, almost a hardening process from all the negative all the time. And
yes.
It's refreshing to hear this can be done. This is being achieved. This good is going out. These organizations are making a difference, and that's the positive aspects that Comenius brings.
So let's take this to the next step and ask the question about what longevity are we going to be seeing here from your framework, from what you guys do at Astute Rabbit, Liz, what you do at IUPUI, Josh, what you do in the church, and both of you within the community itself. What do you see, anticipating the future now? What do you see coming down the pike in 5 to 10 years? What are the things that we need to look for, anticipate? What are the major changes, transformations? Should we be getting ahead of whatever curve it is? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think definitely as we move into the future, video is going to be even, it's a big deal now. It's going to get even bigger. As far as video content on websites, analysts are already saying people are more likely to watch a video than they are to read an article, that sort of thing. I think specifically for churches and ministries and things of that nature, it's going to get to a point where your podcast is going to be a video rather than just an audio file, and you'll have at least just as many people watching that than are actually sitting in your congregation, which I, as a pastor, sort of have mixed feelings about, because it's isolating. I'd rather have people in the congregation than outside watching a video. But I think that on the tech end of things, I think that's where it's going. Social media definitely not going away, because it's a means of connecting people. Not as good of a means of connecting people as face to face, but there is some sort of a virtual connection that we can make that way. So yeah, video, social media. One of the things that we're working on right now as a company that's kind of a new emerging sort of trend is actually virtual reality.
Okay.
So making 3D websites that you can navigate around, actually using your phone by pointing it at things and having different things happen as a result of that. So
oh my!
Get more into that later.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll make sure that I have a good picture then for my 3D likeness and my futuristic view of myself here. Liz, how about from your perspective at IUPUI and as a professor at a university in Indianapolis, what are you seeing the future hold in terms of what these digital marketplaces are doing to education itself?
We're seeing the trends bear out that interpersonal connection, it's stemming from disembodied communication. So I know I'm talking about a negative, but we all know it. We've been around the table and somebody's sitting there with us, and then they bring out their cell phone, they pop it up, they start looking and scrolling, and you're like, excuse me?
Exactly.
Was I of value to you?
Yeah,
and
right.
Now we're finding that more and more people are realizing the negative effects of screen time on the brain patterns, cognitive processing. So when we are doing that interpersonal connection, how do we then manage the tool and device in a way that a church should? And how do we use that voice that it has in a digital presence? What can we do to increase the internal connections? And I think that's really important that we look at that for the future. And I think that can be done in some of these virtual reality moments that Josh has been talking about, where a pastor could just come in and almost relate to that newcomer and walk through, hey, this is what it would be like if you were here, and this is why we value Scripture. You could have him meeting and greeting for his church, but through a digital presence.
So this always comes back to me. I've heard you guys use the word tools a number of times here. So I've got a number of tools at my house. I've got a shovel hanging out in my garage. I've also got a hammer in my toolbox. I am not going to use my hammer to go dig a hole in my garden, nor am I going to use a shovel to pound a nail into my wall. So let's come back to the issue of tools again. How do we help people? How do we teach them? How do we instruct them in this whole digital marketplace bit, the realm in which you guys are working, to help them understand you need this tool for this work, for this purpose, for this time, and not to try to use it in every single thing? How do you do that? How do you communicate that with people?
Yeah, I think it's really a matter of walking them through and just spending time demonstrating how to do each thing. You use YouTube as a spot to host your videos on for your weekly podcast. upload the audio file to this website to get into iTunes, stuff like that. But I think it takes time of actually working with people and showing them how to do things, showing them how to use the tools. One of the things that I found really useful for churches and really that level of an organization on up, even to major corporations and stuff like that, is just using something to manage your social networking sites, because there's so many of them. You got YouTube, you got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever else you're on, and it just makes so much more sense for an organization to just be able to publish one thing to multiple networks and even to schedule that out in advance. So tools like Hootsuite, where you can log in with one account and manage as many networks as you have, and even just showing someone how to schedule posts out a month in advance, so they just don't have to think about it, and they can focus on running their business or pastoring their church or whatever else, and they know that every Monday and Wednesday something's going out on Facebook. It's automated. So showing people how to do things like that, I think, really goes a long way.
Okay, this is something that interests me mostly because I find myself on social media a lot, promoting a lot of different things on a regular basis. And sometimes I find myself doing that because I want to link it to people with a certain group at a certain moment in time. Answer this one real simple question for me. If I'm going to post something in the morning, what is the most beneficial time slot to post something on Facebook or Twitter?
It depends on your audience, Mark, and we can analyze all of that. There are charts out there that even indicate the highest time for your reach, but your reach depends on your audience, and until we understand your audience, you can't determine that exactly. However, there are times of the day that you can see, for example, if you had an older audience, that they are online at that time or are more likely to open at those times. But you have to put in a plan and carry it out.
Sounds like you teach speech or something like that. Know your audience. It would seem like that's kind of an important idea here. So as we're coming down to the end of this particular interview, I want to make sure that we connect with this idea of training up the next generation of communicators. And is there a way that you do this?
There is. I have the pleasure of working currently with 3 interns from IUPUI that are working in another radio station, and they are generating content, and we've made the connection for them to learn in that way. Earlier you had asked if Josh had been in your class. Guess what? Confession here again. He was in my first speech class.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
But he had such talent beyond what I had to teach him. He just was a natural.
Oh, look at that. Getting all the positive strokes here. That's a good thing. So let's take this a step further for you, Josh. I don't know that you're necessarily thinking about succession plans or anything like this at your time of life. But when you think about this, how are you teaching or training other people to do what you do?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because this is such a huge component of everything I do in ministry also. Not only in tech, but also in ministry. My approach really is centered around, come join me in whatever this thing is that I'm doing. So whether it's, you got a new, high schooler in the church that plays guitar, and I'm like, well, hey, let's come play with us on Sundays, or whatever. We just had a couple of people interested in learning how to run the soundboard for us, and so whether it's that, or if I find out that they do have some kind of a technical background and they're interested in website stuff, well, let me show you what I do at work. Here's the project I'm working on. Log into WordPress, do this. And just bring them along with me. I have a lot of fun doing that.
That's great. Sounds like you're a natural teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So as we kind of land this plane here today, what would be the things that you would want to leave the audience with from both of you? What kind of last comments are important that you want to make sure that everybody hears from you guys today?
I actually have a top 10 list.
Oh, good for you.
I think we'll let Josh just take this home.
All right.
And so I'll try to run through this real quick.
That's okay. Take your time.
Basically just, top 10 pieces of advice that we've kind of found to just be generally useful for everyone as they try to manage their online presence. The first thing is, don't get boxed in. What I find a lot with smaller organizations and especially in like trade industries and stuff like that, people are great at what they do. They're brilliant at their job, And frankly, they have better things to do than run a website. And so what they get themselves into, unfortunately, is something that they think is going to save them a lot of money, but ends up restricting what they can do with it. I had a client who, I had developed a new website for them and went to upload it and found out their server doesn't support HTML, which is unthinkable on the internet. It's like, how do you even have a web server that doesn't read HTML files? They had it configured all weird. So they were locked into this system where you had to log into this visual editor and make visual changes. You couldn't make anything new based on it. And so we had to cancel that. They had to spend all this money moving into a new system that was more versatile and we could actually upload things to. And so it ends up costing more money in the long run. So probably the biggest thing I can say is just don't get boxed in to something that doesn't allow room for growth.
Was that number 10? And here we go with number 9.
Yeah. Which is think mobile first. And this is useful not only because half of your audience is most likely going to be on a phone or a tablet, but also because Google, when they index your site, will actually give you greater priority in the rankings if your website does show up on phones, because of the fact that about 50% of your audience will be on a phone. So you want to make sure that you think mobile first. That way it's not a matter of, once the website collapses, how's it going to look? Is it going to be passable? You want to design for that first, because probably over half of your audience will be looking at it that way first. So think in terms of phone.
Here we go. Number 8.
Number 8. Use high quality and optimized images, not just high quality images with a high resolution, but also optimized images, because if you just throw a high resolution JPEG onto a website, that website will take that much longer to load because it has to take care of this massive image. And so what we do is we actually run it through Photoshop, and we pull a couple additional levers and come out with a high resolution optimized image that loads in a tiny fraction of the time. So being able to do things like that.
Here we go. Number 7.
Number 7. Leverage your social media outlets. Like we've already said, what you promote is where the hits are going to go on your analytics. So whether that's a page or it's a landing page or a section, you just built your website, you want to promote the whole thing. Use your homepage. Whatever you promote on Facebook or Twitter, that's what people are going to click on. That's where they're going to go. What number?
Here we go. We're on number 6.
Number 6. I keep losing count.
We're going to the top 5 soon. Number 6.
On that note of social media, use a tool like Hootsuite, because it just takes all the pressure out of it. You realize it's been like 5 days since you posted it on Facebook. Hootsuite will take care of that, because you can sit down on the first of the month, schedule out the whole 30 days of posts, and it's convenient, because then you do that. You set a reminder to do it again next month, and then you don't think about it for a month, and you just go. And then you interact with people on Facebook when they comment on things, and then reply to the comment and do things like that. But it just takes care of itself, makes it a whole lot easier. Number 5.
Here we go.
Now.
5 from Astute Rabbit Media tips for today.
Number 5 is deliver content regularly. A lot of people think of a website as a poster, and it's really not a poster. It has to be more of a living organism, because if Google sees that it doesn't change, then it's going to be prioritized under websites that are changing, that do have fresh content being delivered. And so, if you have a blog, post to that thing regularly. Keep it fresh. If something changes, update pages as often as you can, but especially if there's a blog, you want to keep that content fresh, because it keeps it high enough in the rankings.
Here we go. Number 4 tech tip.
Check your public-facing content regularly. Especially as your website gets bigger, as content gets heavier and heavier, and as you move into things like page caching and stuff like that, what you think is out there may not still be out there, especially if you're on WordPress and you have it set to auto-update. Your theme may update, and a plugin may no longer be compatible, and you look at your front page and you're like, where'd everything go? And so what you have to then do is restore things back and deal with compatibility, things like that. So you want to at least look at your website once every couple weeks, every week or so. Make sure that the things are still there, because especially if you're on a system that auto updates, things may not be what you think they are if you've not looked at it in a month or so. So
Number 3.
Have a backup system in place. Because of number 4, have a backup system in place. Just last night, I popped into a website that I'd been working on and saw that the sidebar was completely gone. And what had happened was I had done some custom coding on one of the templates for that sidebar, and the plugin developer released a whole new version that didn't even include that template file that I had edited. And suddenly the whole sidebar was gone. And so I jumped back in my files and grabbed the one that I'd worked on and uploaded it. And WordPress recognized the previous version, and everything was good to go. But none of that would have been possible without a backup copy, and I'd have had to start completely from scratch, and that would have been another 5 or 10 hours of work to get the sidebar back to the point where I had it. And so a good backup system can definitely go a long way.
Here we go. Drum roll for number 2.
Number 2, understand the difference between writing for the web versus other forms of writing. You write a paper, and that's one form of writing, but that style of writing is really not going to go very far on the web. Like we've already said, walls of text. You've got 6 or 7 seconds to capture people's attention and give them to the content that they're actually looking for. And so, it tends to be a lot of lists, a lot of bullet points, a lot of visual hierarchy. Not everything is a paragraph, just straight font. You have bold, you have underlines, you have different heading styles. You want to make use of those things. And there's a whole lot more when you write for the web. There's a book. What book is that?
Well, I'm a Steve Krug fan, but I don't think the audience would understand. But this guy teaches things like his titles are It's Not Rocket Science, It's Just a Website, and things like this. So you have to understand there is a lot more actual science to what we do, and knowing how to connect that content and write it well for that audience connection.
Yeah, and so there's quite a bit more to it. I'm kind of being overly simplistic with talking about fonts and headings and stuff like that. So that's why I bring up the books and things like that. But down to the last
Number one.
Use a good analytics tool, because it'll tell you what things you need to change. What we usually do for people that have never had a website, they don't have any analytics on anything. We'll build something, we'll upload it, and we'll say give it a month. And we'll come back at the 1 month point, and we'll say, okay, how did it do based on the analytics results? That'll tell us, what buttons need to go in the navigation bar at the top. That'll tell us what needs to go on the home page. It'll tell us how to funnel traffic where we need to go. And without that, the tool just doesn't do what it's designed to do.
There you go.
And so
Now, what I was thinking after that long list of wonderful things, if that sounded like a foreign language to you, we're just a phone call away.
There you go. So
that language.
yeah, so Astute Rabbit Media are the folks that we have here today, Josh Collingswood and Liz Meyer. And you want to make sure to check out our websites, ComeniusInstitute.com and warpandwoof.org, because both of those websites are organized by Astute Rabbit Media. In fact, I go so far as to say, Josh, I'm going to put you on speed dial and text you, man, because I got so many questions. Would you please take care of this? I got my own personal backup system. You want these people on your site. Make sure to check them out, Astute Rabbit Media. Go look at them. Josh Collingswood, Liz Meyer, thanks ever so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We are going to be back next week and hear from a tremendous organization in Indianapolis which is doing good work for young people. Look for posts about that coming up next Tuesday night and then Wednesday morning. Until then, you've been listening to Comenius Institute-sponsored Warp and Woof Radio from the Hope Center in Indy. Make sure to come over and see us today, and we'll see you next week.